Thank you for joining us for Sermons on Demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. We provide these videos as a way to share the pulpit messages and teachings offered at Friendship Grace Brethren Church. If you find these videos a helpful resource, please drop us a note at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com. Now open your Bibles and get ready to dig into the Word of God.
Okay, we're in Joshua chapter 15, not 14. Did I do it again? No, that is right. I'm ahead of myself, and I shouldn't be. We move into the distribution of the land into various tribes. For many Bible students, this section becomes really tedious. I understand that because if you don't like geography, you go through chapter 50, this next section that we're going through, it gets a little tedious because it says, from this place to 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 this place. Well, I don't know where those places are, and I don't know what this means, and so forth. So it gets a little tedious. It's difficult to see biblical principles in the text that describes geographic boundaries. While we may not recognize the territorial landmarks referred to in the text, by focusing only on the landmarks, we miss what else is contained in the text. To build on this, we briefly need to go back to chapter 14, verses 1 and 2, which is why I put them there. These are the inheritance that the people of Israel received in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the fathers' houses of the tribes of the people of Israel gave them to inherit. Their inheritance was by lot, just as the Lord had commanded by the hand of Moses for the 9 1/2 tribes. Wasn't an arbitrary allotment of territory, but an allotment that was based upon the direction of God. Through the use of lots or the casting of dice, territory was distributed. Joshua, the tribal leaders, and the high priest together sought the direction of God. So now here in chapter 15, that becomes very clear that the leadership of the people was trusting God to make his plan known to them through the use of lots. 40 years earlier, the Hebrews were afraid God would not give the land into their hand, and now they had seen God work in the conquest and were now prepared to have God divide the land among them. The transformation during these 40 years in the wilderness of the Hebrews to now become Israelites who were trusting God and following his plan. As the distribution of the land is recounted in the text, we need to see the reality of the transformation, however short-lived it was. Now, I want you to think for just a moment about this period of time in the life of the soon-to-be Israelites. 47 years or so earlier, they were slaves. They were slaves who only could do what they were told to do. Then they spent 40 years, or roughly, on a camping trip. And now they became landowners, and they had to grow crops, and they had to manage cities and so forth. So they had to go from being slave owners, or slaves, to being soldiers, to being citizens in 40 years. That's a big transition. That's two different serious, huge paradigm shifts. One like we've never seen in history before. And I hope we never see in history again. And that's what Moses and Joshua were responsible for doing. You know, we often wonder why they had to go through 40 years of wilderness wandering. Maybe it took that long to transition slaves into soldiers into citizens. You know, think about what we know in our own country's history after the Civil War, the transition to normal society. For many, that's still going on. And so it's kind of remarkable that we have this transition from slave, soldier, citizen in this 40 years. Now, it wasn't perfect. They didn't do it well all the time, but that's what has been going on. And we kind of miss that when we just glance through the text. God was distributing to the tribes territory, and within the territory to the clans, and within that territory to the families. Each of the larger territories were marked and recorded. The smaller territories were similarly marked. In Deuteronomy 19:14, God gave the command to Moses, "You shall not move your neighbor's landmark, which the men of old have set in their inheritance, that you will hold in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess." Now here's a command given during the wandering, telling them that when you finally make conquest and the territory, the boundaries have been set, the boundaries of the tribe, the boundary of the clan, the boundary of the family, that it's all been set, and you don't get to move them. It's like going to the city and saying, "I really want my lot line to be over here." They go, "No, it doesn't work that way." "Well, I'm going to buy that land." "Fine, you'll still have two lot lines. That's just the way it works." Just ask Steve. He's been fighting that battle for a long time because somebody tried to move the lot lines on him accidentally. So here's a command 40 years before they make conquest in the land, reminding them that you won't be able to move these lot lines. These are there for a reason. And what do you suppose the reason is? Whose land is it? God's. And he's giving them right to it, to use it, for a period of time. But those lines had to remain because every 50 years the property went back to the original tribe. Today in Israel, there's been a couple of Supreme Court challenges in the Israeli Supreme Court about this, but land owned at the time, May 14, 1948, land that was owned by Palestinian Christians remains in Palestinian Christians. Land that's owned by Jews remains in Jews. Land that's owned by Palestinian Arabs or Palestinian Muslims remains in Muslim hand. With the exception of area designated as I don't know what the right word is, where Jews now occupy or is part of regular Israel. And so when you're selling land, you have to be careful who you sell it to. They don't have all these lot lines anymore, but they keep the same type of rule. They don't have tribal allotments anymore, but there's still the sense of this rule in the Israeli law. Israel's possession and use of the land depended on their obedience to God, and God had to the law God had given to them through Moses. A continued violation of the law would result in temporary loss in use of the possession of the land, and we saw this happen. We saw this happen multiple times. We typically only think of 2 times Israel's removed from the land. It actually has happened multiple times in history. We have the first major time in 722 when the Assyrians take the northern tribes. They're gone into captivity. And then 605 to 586, they're gone into captivity. But in between that time, some of Judah was taken into captivity and people were removed from the land. And then Judah got it back. And then what happened in 70 AD? Again, Jerusalem was destroyed, the temple was destroyed, and Israel ceased to exist until May 1948. 70 AD to May 48, they were off the land. That's called the Great Diaspora, the Great Dispersion of the people. And so Israel comes back in May. Actually, they started coming back years before, but they become a nation again in May. But in between, there never was an Israel. So we have these periods of time where God has removed them from the land.
What was it
Multiple things. Improperly, it was called Palestine, which is a throwback to a Roman euphemism. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. The land is not Palestine. Yasser Arafat, the greatest Palestinian, was Egyptian. There's just no such thing as a Palestine. It was under the charter that was drawn up by the predecessor to the United Nations. They labeled it a couple of different things to that territory. One time, in one way, it's labeled the Levant. The Levant is bigger than Israel. Sometimes it has been, it was British, Holy Land. There's another word I can't quite read there. It's had multiple names. It never was called Israel, since it wasn't even called Israel during Jesus' time. It was Judea and Samaria. Israel stopped being its name in 722 BC, when the nation of Israel, the 10 tribes to the north, were taken captive. Then the 2 tribes to the south were called Judah, and that's where the word Jew comes from. It's a short form of Judite. When they returned from captivity, it was basically Judah. There's one other name, but I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. Wasn't Israel. Israel was a brand new name, a brand new old name, old new stock, that was used in 48. Okay, so let's go into some of the distribution of the land now. Chapter 15, verse 1. The allotment for the tribe of the people of Judah, according to their clans, reached southward to the boundary of Edom, to the wilderness of Zin, at the furthest south. And their south boundary ran from the end of the Salt Sea, from the bay that faces southward. It goes out southward of the ascent of Akrabim, passes along Zin, and goes up south to Kadesh Barnea, along by Hezron, up to Adar, turns south to Karka, passes along to Asmon, goes out by the brook of Egypt, and comes to the end of the sea. This shall be your south boundary. Now, what's the brook of Egypt? Or some of your translations may have the river of Egypt. That's what everybody says. I'm sorry? No, because the Euphrates is way the other way. Egypt, southwest. The brook, or the Shinon of Egypt, is a small river that runs from the Mediterranean south to the Red Sea. That is the southern boundary around. If the southern boundary of Judah was the Nile, then all of Goshen and all of northern Egypt would be in Israel. And I'll show you on a map when we get done reading the passage. One of our passages on Wednesday night talked about the brook of Egypt as well. In the east boundary is the Salt Sea, or the Dead Sea, to the mouth of the Jordan, and the boundary of the north side runs from the bay of the sea at the mouth of the Jordan, and the boundary goes up to Beth Hoglah and passes along the north to Beth Araba, and the boundary goes up to the stone of Bohan, the son of Reuben. And the boundary goes up to Debir from the valley of Achor, and so northward, turning toward Gilgal, which is opposite the ascent of Adamim, which is on the south side of the valley, and the boundary passes along to the waters of En Shemesh and En Zin and Rogel. Then the boundary goes on to the valley of the son of Hinnom, the southern shoulder of the Jebusite, that is Jerusalem, and the boundary goes up to the top of the mountain that lies over against the valley of Hinnom on the west, and at the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. Then the boundary extends from the top of the mountain to the spring of the waters of Nephtoah, and from there to the cities of Mount Ephron. Then the boundaries bends to Bala, that is Kiriath Jearim. And the boundary circles west of Bala to Mount Seir, passes along to the northern shoulder of Mount Jearim, that is Cheslon, and goes down to Beth Shemesh and passes along Timnah. The boundary goes out to the shoulder of the hill north of Ekron. Then the boundary bends around to Shekron and passes along Mount Bala and goes to Jabneel. Then the boundary comes to the end at the sea. On the west, the boundary was the Great Sea with its coastline. This is the boundary around the people of Judah according to their clans. It's easier to just look at a picture. So you have the major boundaries being the Dead Sea, the Brook of Egypt down here. I guess it would probably be a little further south than on this map. And then the Mediterranean on this side. And, of course, all of the little jogs that it takes. Judah received the largest area. They got a lot of useless territory. And right in the middle of them, Simeon has their territory. Simeon's completely taken up, swallowed up by Judah. And eventually, Simeon kind of ceases to exist as a tribe and is just swallowed up by Judah. The brook, I don't know if I have any other maps that I included in this. It doesn't show it either. No, it's down here. Way down here. I should have gotten a map that showed that a little more clear. But I like this map because it shows us the initial geographic divisions of the land. So Judah is bounded to the south by Egypt, to the east by Edom and Moab, and to the west by the Mediterranean. It surrounds Simeon. It initially has the tribe of Dan here. Dan gets tired of not having what they want and having to fight, and so they escape and go up here to where the city of Dan eventually is, and they occupy some territory up there. And part of the inheritance here is this coastal plain, but Judah never really conquered that. Who lives in this region here? Philistines. Gaza. I can't read them all. Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Lachish, Gezer. Those are all Philistine cities. Now, when Judah first occupies the region, the Philistines were just getting started. The Philistines are actually Greek. They're from the Greek islands. And they were looking for new land. Some went down to Egypt. Some settled there in that region. And this is where they get a foothold. And Judah doesn't take them out. And it becomes a real problem 400 years later for David, when the Philistines become a significant power in the region. Had they taken them out initially when they first landed, there wouldn't have been the problem. But they didn't. But Judah does a good job of settling the rest of the region. So Judah has all of this region. This is all desert down here. This is the Negev, and it's all pretty rocky and dry and nasty. This is pretty hilly, mountainous, rocky, dry, nasty area. The only real nice area, and that's moderately nice, is this area right around Jerusalem. Okay, questions on Judah? And no, I'm not going to say all the names again. Okay.
So you suppose this one, I mean, Golden where it can. You know, could it be that when the millennial kingdom comes and Israel is regenerated or becomes a nation again, maybe the tribes come back as tribes, and it tells them at that point, here's what God said you're going to occupy. You don't need to fight amongst yourselves. Now that you're a power, now that you're my people again, now that we're doing all of that, here's what I originally said are going to be your territory.
It's kind of like we're reading the plat map for the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
Because that's where they were, that's the possession God gave them in the land. Now, it's hard for us to comprehend it because our relationship with God is not tied to a piece of dirt. Israel's relationship with God was tied to a piece of dirt, to a specific piece of dirt. And God said, I'm going to give you this specific piece of dirt. All the way, you know, Joshua, Eleazar, and the tribal leaders, they all got together and they cast lots and they determined that this family is going to have this piece of dirt. That's a special deal. That's a special allotment from God. And so there's a lot of their relationship with God tied into what we read here. But this also sets up, as Butch was talking about, sets up the future. Their future, their temporal future for the next 1,000 years, but also the millennial future, when again the land will be divided. Scholars are in debate whether or not we will be divided like this in the millennial kingdom. There's nothing that says it won't, but there's nothing that says it will. So God was setting up for them their immediate future and very possibly their eternal future. Yeah, it's possible. But for us, we can't comprehend. Maybe the American Indians might be a little more understanding of this because of their tribal boundaries until we started moving them. They had a tie to the land. Maybe that's a little more in keeping. We don't have such a tie to the land that they do. Most of the people around them or a lot of the people around them were nomadic, and they were nomadic for 40 years, and so this is again a big paradigm shift for them to all of a sudden be in a place where I have a specific piece of dirt. It's God's, but He's given me title to it for me to serve Him. And so this is more than just a civil engineering feat to pass out the keys to the land. It's also part of a religious ceremony, if you will, where they are being equipped by God to serve Him in this piece of dirt. It's a kind of a big deal. According to the commandments of the Lord to Joshua, He gave to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, a portion among the people of Judah. Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron. Arba was the father of Anak. And Caleb drove out from there the three sons of Anak, Sheshai, Iman, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak. And he went up from there against the inhabitants of Debir. Now the name of Debir formerly was Kiriath Sepher. And Caleb said, whoever strikes Kiriath Sepher and captures it, to him I will give Aksa, my daughter, as wife. So here we are again. Caleb gets a small portion of land. What did it say? Hebron, that's right. I couldn't remember the name. Hebron. So Hebron is right here. So he gets a special portion of Judah to be his his specifically. Now, this is a fairly large piece. You know, this is the Ponderosa size ranch that he gets, because he's one of the ones that are specially provided for by God, because he trusted God when they went across when the spies went across. There is some question of whether or not Caleb was actually a Jew. I've done some more reading on that recently, and I'm beginning to move. I used to be more that he was a Jew. I'm beginning to think maybe less that he was a Jew, but had been proselyted. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference, just fun stuff to study. Question about Caleb? This is the inheritance of the tribe of the people of Judah according to their clan. So now we're going to break down Judah a little bit more. The cities belonging to the tribe of the people of Judah in the extreme south toward the boundary of Edom were Gabzeel, Eder, Jagur, Kina, Dimona, Abda, or Adada, Kadesh, Hazor, Ethnan, Ziph, Telem, Beloth, Hazar Hadada, Kerioth Herzon, that is Hazor, Amam, it should be, Shema, Molada, Hazar Gadah, Heshmon, Beth Pelet, Hazar Shaul, Beersheba, Biziathiah, Bela, Lime, Ezem, El Tolad, Chesil. You guys are having fun, aren't you? Horma, Ziklag, Matamana, Sanasana. Why can't they just have regular names? Lebioth, Shilim, Ain, and Rimmon, in all 29 cities with their villages. It's not written there for us. Now that brings up an interesting point. Let's take Lee County, for example. The largest city now is Cape Coral. And then but let's go with this county seat of Fort Myers, because it was here first. We have little pockets around it, right? We have Alva, we have Lehi, we have Sanibel, Captiva, all these little pockets around it. They were all part of the city-state of that city. So you have 29 little Fort Myers with a whole bunch of little Alvas and Bonitas and Esteros and stuff around it. That's what makes up each city. Each city also had with it farmland. You know, we usually think of you either live in the city or you live in the farm, and then we created this thing we called the suburbs, that you still are in the city, but in the way it was, we have the city, farmland, and a bunch of villages all around. That's what went with each city. So it's a good point that's being made here. 29 cities with their villages, meaning all the farmland around them and all their villages. And that's just in the south of Judah. So that's this region here, and some of that ultimately would become part of Simeon as well. Then it goes on to Zena, Hadashah, Migdal Gad, Delian, Mizpah, Joktheel, Lachish, Bozkath, Eglon, Kaban, Laman, Chitlish, Gederoth, Beth Dagon, Nama, and Makkedah, 16 cities with their villages. Libnah, Ether, Ashen, Iftah, Ashna, Nezib, Kyla, Akzib, and Mareshah, 9 cities with their villages. I don't know where these places are. Ekron with their towns and its villages. So let me go back. I'm skipping way ahead of myself, aren't I? Yeah, but I break them down. In 13 to 19, we have the portion that was given to Caleb. In 20 to 62, the first section, 21 to 31 or 32, are the cities in the Negev. That's the southern boundaries. These cities describe the city, or in 33 to 36, these verses describe the cities in the northern area of Judah, which is in the vicinity of the Wadi Sorok. In 37 to 41, the central lowlands, we find these smaller cities. And then in 42 and 44, these are the city in the Shephelah, or lowlands, a little south in most of the northern Judean cities. I'm sweating, thinking too hard. 45 to 47, here we have the cities in the Philistine plain. Judah did not conquer these, and Israel did not possess them until David defeated the Philistines during his reign. So that's where we are here. Ekron with its town and villages. From Ekron to the sea and all that were beside by the side of Ashdod with their villages. Ashdod, its town and villages. Gaza, its town and villages. To the brook of Egypt and the great sea with its coastline. So the Philistine area is here. This is the area that was being talked about, the Shephelah. Just below the northern cities is this kind of fertile, kind of the nicest area of Judah. 48 to 60. And the hill, and in the hill country, Shamir, Jatir, Soka, Dana, Kirbath Sana, that is Debir, Anab, Eshtemoth, Anim, Goshen, not to be confused with the Goshen in Egypt, and not to be confused with the Goshen in Indiana. Holon and Giloth, and 11 cities and their villages. Arab, Duma, Eshen, Janim, Beth Tapur, Aphekah, Humta, Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, and Zior, 9 cities with their villages. Maon, Carmel, Ziph, Juta, Jezreel, Jokdeam, Janoth, Kain, Gibeah, and Timnah, 10 cities with their villages. Halhul, Beth Zur, Gedor, Marath, Beth Enoth, and El-Tekon, 6 cities and their villages. Kiriath Baal, that is Kiriath Jearim, and Rabbah, 2 cities with their villages. So that's all of this northern. Whoa, wrong button there, buddy. Holy cow! I don't want to do it again. No. Here we go. That's the northern area right here. All these cities along the line between Dan and Benjamin and Judah. Kiriath Baal, that is Kiriath Yearim and Rabbah, and 2 cities and their villages. In the wilderness, Beth Araba, Midden, and Sekaka. Nibshan, the city of Salt, and Gedi, 6 cities and their villages. So those are those cities here along the right along the Dead Sea. 63. But the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the people of Judah could not drive out. So the Jebusites dwell with people of Judah at Jerusalem to this day. When did Jerusalem finally get conquered? When 7 years into David's kingdom. Yeah. So we're looking at the period of conquest, roughly 400 years of the judges, 40 years of Saul, and then 7 more years when David finally conquers Jebus, Jerusalem, and kicks out the Jebusites. That's a long time for those people to be living with them. Okay, any questions? Yeah. No, I'm not going to pronounce those names again. Well, but how would you know? Yeah. I need to practice on saying them more authentically with more guttural sounds, but well, there's just so many opportunities for me to say something that would be wrong there, so I'm not going to say anything at all. I'm going to try to be good. Yeah. The Gaza Strip is right here. The West Bank is pretty much territory like this here, kind of like this. Goes in and around Jerusalem and up here, and then to Gaza. It is the Palestinian territories, Gaza and the West Bank, are controlled by different factions of Palestinians, and so you have different governments in them, and so they operate differently. And but the Gaza Strip is this piece of essentially Philistine territory. All that the Philistines owned that Judah didn't take is now possessed by the Palestinians as Gaza. And it is the worst slum in the world. The Gaza Strip is the worst slum in the world. Oh, yeah. Because every day from Gaza, they're launching missiles into rockets, without any guidance, into Israel. Every day. How'd you like to live with not knowing when a rocket was going to come and land in your... Every day, rockets from Gaza. I mean, they're not much more than Estes model rockets, but, they do some damage if they happen to hit a house. Yeah. Gaza's the biggest slum. Father, thank you for allowing us to see a picture, even though sometimes it's tedious, of saying all the names. It gives us an idea of the relationship you have with the people, because the time was taken to divide the land and give it to individual families for their use to serve you. Thank you for that detail and for giving us an insight into your character a little bit through that. We trust that you would be honored and glorified by our study, and as we worship you further in the service to follow, we trust that would bring you glory, and that we would see people understand your word better, worship you in reality in their life on a daily basis. In Jesus' name. Thank you for watching or listening to this teaching on demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. Please consider sending us an email at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com to let us know how this teaching may have helped you. Please also consider joining us in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church, located at 10251 Metro Parkway, Suite 116, Fort Myers, Florida, just south of the intersection of Metro and Colonial Boulevard. Sunday school begins at 9 and worship service at 10 a.m. We look forward to seeing you in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church.